Paulette, and I'm the writer-in-residence here at the Jasper Municipal Library on Treaty 6 and 8 territory, both sides of the Athabasca River. This is one of the first sessions that we're doing here at the library, and now till the end of April, every Thursday we are going to have writers and authors from Jasper, our local gems, who will be talking about their journey towards the written word and also the product that they have. So the sessions are called From Process to Product, and what I'm trying to do, with the help of the library of course, is to showcase the genius that we have in Jasper already, and that these people have been working pretty much on their own in isolation. And so this is a chance as writer-in-residence to bring these people together and give them a sense of community. And so we'll be sharing our love of writing with the rest of the community in even broader sense than we have in the past. Sure, and Holly will be asking me questions to make this less awkward.
Hi. So how long have you been writing?
Well, Holly, I've been writing since, well, a really, 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 really long time. And I'm glad you asked that question, because there's a huge difference between writing and being an author. And writing, I see it as something like painters. If you like to paint, people will paint. And then after a certain while, they become artists, and so they're paid for their work. Same thing with writing. I've been writing for a really long time because in my family there was always that the need to express themselves. So I have artists in my family. I have extraordinary storytellers in my family. I have musicians, everything. So there's always been a want to sort of express myself. So I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't dance. And my husband and my son will tell you I have absolutely no musical talent whatsoever. So I can't sing, I can't play any instruments, but I can write. So that's what I've been doing for a long time, and I think I've gotten pretty good at it. So now I am considered an authority on certain subjects, and that's what an author means, is that you are an authority on a subject. So I've been writing probably close to, I'd say about 40 years, and I've been an author for the last 30 years.
Wow. So,
wow, you're old.
Oh, no. So what do you like to write? Poetry, nonfiction, fiction?
I do write a little bit of everything. I'm a poet, so that influences how I write everything else. I enjoy poetry because it suited my lifestyle. Very short, so I could write it anywhere and it would become something else. When I started writing novels, it was a whole other planet, and I found it really, really difficult to hold these entire universes in my head all the time. So I would write poetry to sort of give my brain a break, and then I would go back to writing the novel. So I like writing both of them. I've written for magazines, I write nonfiction stuff, but I really love writing poetry, probably the best.
Nice. I like reading your poetry the best. Can you explain your process on how it goes from your head to a published book?
Sure. It's a little bit like, I don't know if you guys can see what's on the table here, but when I'm writing, I'll go for long walks, and I walk probably about, I don't know, 5-10 kilometers a day. So it's about, I did the math, it's about almost 2,000 kilometers a year that I walk. And while I'm walking, I will be thinking about stuff. And so I fill up these journals, and at the end of a year or 2 years, I read back over the journals and I start to look at patterns and themes that sort of have come up, and then I can go back and start writing and putting it together. So each book is a compilation of probably about 2 years worth of work. I've gotten smarter. So what I do after I finished writing in the notebooks during the day, I spend at least an hour or two every day turning those random thoughts and images or descriptions into poems. And so I have more substantial than just a notebook. It's actually typed out and making some sense. And so it makes sense a little bit faster than it used to in the long run. And then all of the poems have to be edited within an inch of their life, so that there's absolutely nothing that can be added, nothing that can be taken out. The punctuation is exactly where it's supposed to be. People that read it can feel that sense of rhythm and walking and breathing, and it's not difficult for them to do that. That's really important. And then I send it out to various publishers, which is getting a bit sketchy nowadays as well, because a lot of publishers have gone under in the last couple of years. I don't publish with huge, big publishing companies. I like smaller companies because you can be very, very hands-on. For example, I can help choose and help guide what will be on the cover of the books. In larger publishing companies, they don't let you do that. They just have a stable full of artists and stock photos from Getty Images or whatever, and they'll plonk it on there. And it's not necessarily always very reflective of the actual work that's in. So I like the smaller presses. After about a year, sometimes 2 of editing again, then the book comes out. So each book represents probably about 5 years, more or less, of time, and that's a lot of time.
Yeah, that's like 8 years just right there on the table.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is there a difference between publishing your poetry versus a novel?
Yeah, the sheer amount of time is I think what most people would be really surprised at, because some people think you write a whole bunch of poetry, you send it off to a publisher, boom, you get published, boom, within a year you're making $1 million. So it's a little longer and a little less than $1 million that you make. Like I said, each one is the poetry is about 4 or 5 years each book, and the novel, Talon, took about, from the time I started writing her all the way to when she was published, was about 10 years. So that's a long time. Autant, I went back again, really a long time, and I tell people it took me about 50 years to write that one, because it was really difficult to write and difficult to research, and because it deals a lot with God and angels and bees, there's a lot of unspoken language. It's kind of hard to research God, but so that took a lot more imagination and a lot more work. So anywhere between 5 and 10 years per book. So it's probably like 800 years of work. So maybe I do look pretty good for 800 years old. It's a lot. Yeah, but it's what I do. So there you go.
You love it.
Yeah, I do. I love it, and it also it gives me something to do, but it also gives me a real sense of a sense of accomplishment. When you're working on it, you don't realize what's going to happen, and I don't sit there and think, is my reader going to like this sort of thing? That doesn't even come into it. It's so time consuming. It's like knitting a scarf or a big blanket. You just keep doing it until you're done, and then and then you give it to somebody, and I think that's where the pleasure comes from, is actually just giving it to somebody else, and you see them enjoying it, and then you go, ah, yeah, that was worth it. And it is. That's really what's worth it, is that it makes sense to somebody else. And so that's great.
Perfect. Lovely. Do you have any final words for anyone entering in?
Like advice?
Yeah, advice. Yeah.
For people who want to write, I say yes, please go ahead. And part of this writer in residence program that the library has been really generous in giving me time is that on Thursday nights as well, I come in here between 6 and 8 and sit at that table over there and have people come in who they're interested in writing, and they might have some questions about, like, how do I publish, or if I have a journal, how do I turn that into a novel, or even just therapy sessions. Sometimes I think writers are very introverted and we work in isolation a lot, and sometimes it's just nice to be able to come out, sit with somebody else who's been through there, and any questions that you have, I can at least show you where to find the answer if I don't have the answer. It's important for people, I think even in this day and age, Holly and I were just talking about so many questions about the world, and I think I've seen a real surge of poets coming together and novelists coming together and just writers, period, coming together. That's my circle, that's my world. And I'm watching my news feeds on Twitter or Instagram, whatever, and everybody wants to come together and talk about it. It was like when COVID first got started. Within, I think it was by April, the end of April, we had already put together an anthology of poetry called We Are One. I mean, the poets came together really fast, and George Melnick was the guy who marshaled us all together here in Alberta, and then all over Canada, and all the poets, not all the poets in Canada, but a great majority of them submitted work, and then the anthology was put together with Bayeux Press, and it was just amazing that they were able to publish that fast. And that's what this residency is supposed to do, is to sort of kickstart people to say, yes, we can start putting things together. Yes, there are extraordinary storytellers in this town. There's wonderful things that happen to us. We have great imaginations, and we should be able to put that down somewhere, somehow, for the benefit of other people, another gift somewhere. So, any more questions?
No, that was amazing.
So what I'd like to do is maybe read a little bit out of some stuff.
Yeah.
There's a bit to choose from, so it's not quite half an hour of the process part, but if you have any other questions, you just ask. Just ask. So some of the work that I first published, it's sort of a nature theme, the environment writing. I never, when we first moved here, I didn't want to write about the mountains because they're very big and it's been done. And I thought, I don't have the chops to write about mountains and mountain life and whatever. So it took a fairly long time to be comfortable enough to do that. And what really inspired me for First Mountain was my nephew, Bryce, was in the Canadian Army, and he was a soldier that did a few tours in Afghanistan. And while he was in Afghanistan, he asked if I would write some poetry for him and his tent mates, so that they wouldn't forget, because they were all from Canada, and they were missing, it was like plus 45 there, and they had these camel scorpions and things like that that were freaking them out. And these were all farm boys and, you know, kids from Alberta or wherever in Canada, but they didn't have scorpions that were that big, and they didn't have plus 45 degree weather. So Bryce said, would you please just write some things about winter? So at the same time, I was teaching social studies grade 8 at the high school here, and we realized part of our social studies curriculum was talking about Aztecs. And the Aztecs, the only people who could write poetry, who were allowed to write poetry because it was such a wonderful, gifted thing, were the soldiers. And so I thought, well, come on, this is perfect. So we were writing to soldiers because they were soldiers, and we were hoping that it would encourage them to write us back. So my grade 8s wrote poetry for the Canadian Army, and there we put them on bigger sheets of paper and whatnot, and I would send them to Bryce every week, and he thought that was great, and he would read them to his tent mates. And he had gone off on leave for a couple of weeks, and when he came back, his tent mates were really upset because as he was gone, they weren't getting their dose of poetry. And so they said, give us her email so that we can at least get the poetry every week. If you decide to leave, then at least we'll still have the poetry. So I thought that was pretty great. So the kids made these big, huge posters, and they put them up at CAF, which is it's like a big meeting hall in Kabul. Yeah, and it's like the restaurant. They had the Tim Hortons there and stuff. So the walls of CAF had our posters on them, and that was fantastic. The kids were just so thrilled that could possibly happen. They had a higher readership than I'll ever have, probably, because about 500 soldiers would go through CAF every day. So 500 people would read those poems every day. So the idea of making something and giving it to somebody so that they can be happy, or that they can learn something, or that it would take their mind away from those great big camel spiders for a little while, to me that was absolutely worth it. So while the kids were busy writing, I was busy writing as well. And I realized that maybe I did have enough experience of living in the mountains to write some poetry. 18th day. Elk bugles across the street, shaking the crabapple tree with the tips of his teeth and lips. His immense rack turns on impossibly thin legs as loon sounds up from on the slough, blessing this new day. This one is for Bryce. It's called 34th Day. This day is born in the wake of geese flying lance formation and threading the air with calls to come home. Gather yourselves to me and come home. If yearning were a shape, it would be the lance thrown south. If yearning were sound, it would be geese and the hot smell of trees burning and rubbing their roots together, anxious to be off. Wrapping their shawls of sparkling around themselves, they turn and wave. They wave great arms. They wave the smallest finger. Turn gracefully on skeletal legs and melt to a hard point on the pale horizon. Seventy-third day. The sound of creek under ridges and scars of ice, hollow murmuring. There's fire in water, muscled water, moving. We see only the surface of things. $115th day. Self-respect differs from self-esteem. One bloodies your hands, and the other is blunted by touch. 116th day. If you are still pushing against the wall, when it falls, so will you. (181st day). Ants foam over the tree, trying to target what I breathe on the bark. They move on shiny point shoes, they click to the warmth, never doubting what they will find will be useful. As my species too eagerly seeks out heat or light, never knowing if it will be for the loving or the learning. Both are useful. 183rd day. Find something big to pit yourself against, to throw loneliness into. Shadow self safe. Amid bone, snow, and stone, moss, moth, hummingbird, and me. The precious, the most tender, the delicate of design. We live here now. So the idea for Bryce was that he said, I don't want poetry that's going to hurt my head. I don't want, to try to figure it out. So these are very simple, and they're very much what they are. If they talk about a squirrel, like I told Bryce, it's a squirrel. It doesn't have to have a metaphor. It doesn't have to have another meaning. It really just is about squirrels. So First Mountain is a good one to start with. And if you want to hear more, you'll just have to tune in and do the next one. That's it.